Welcome to Storm and Chocolate. I'm Storm and Norman. Today's song is number 37, the live version of Lines on My Face by Peter Frampton from Frampton Comes Alive. Song 37 marks the first live rendition of a song with vocals, and it won't be the last from this album, as I explain. The album Frampton Comes Alive was a massive hit in 1976, recorded from his 1975 U.S. tour. It wasn't his songs that made the album great, it was his performance. After all, most of the songs had been around for years in studio versions, but they didn't do well. And like the parallel with Kiss, when the label put out a live album that demonstrated what the songs could be and how dynamic the artists were, audiences were blown away. Peter Frampton was born in 1950 in Kent, England. By the end of the decade, he had taught himself guitar and piano and was taking classical piano lessons. He attended the same high school as David Bowie, or the other way around, as Frampton's father was the art director at the school. The two had competing bands at the school, although Bowie was 3 years his senior. They would often spend their lunch breaks playing together. At the age of 14, Frampton was in a band produced and managed by Bill Wyman, bass guitarist with the Rolling Stones. This is starting to sound like Steve Miller's history and the fact that Steve's father was friends with Les Paul and became his... At the age of 14, Frampton was in a band produced and managed by Bill Wyman, bass guitarist with the Rolling Stones. This is starting to sound like the Steve Miller history and the fact that Steve's father was friends with Les Paul and he became... I don't like the way it's written. Who became his godfather. At 16, Frampton became a successful child singer as a member of The Herd. Peter came in as part of the revolving door policy of band members and managers, lol, but was the main reason the group enjoyed the success they did, with 3 top 10 UK singles from 1960. Can you get delete from?
Can I get delete from? I don't know if I can get anything right now.
Peter came in as part of the revolving door policy of band members and managers, lol, but was the main reason the group enjoyed the success they did, with 3 top 10 UK singles during 1967 to 68. However, Frampton was dissatisfied with being the teen idol face of the band and not being taken seriously as the guitarist and one of the principal songwriters. He left to form Humble Pie at the end of 1968 with Steve Marriott, most recently of the Small Faces. We'll cover more of Steve Marriott's history when we cover Humble Pie's 30 Days in the Hole, recorded after Frampton left the band. After 4 studio albums and just before their first live recording, Rocking the Fillmore, Frampton bailed on the group in 1971 due to increasing tensions with Marriott. Ironically, this live album became the band's biggest success, giving them their first gold record in the US and bringing their previous album to the same level in its wake. And I'm about to tell you the same story of Peter's solo career as I did with his time in Humble Pie. Frampton's solo debut was 1972's Winds of Change, followed by 1973's Frampton's Camel, 1974's Something's Happening, and 1975's Frampton. Shh, go back.
Why?
Because I said Frampton. Winds of Change barely cracked the Billboard 200 at 177, and none of its singles charted. All of the songs, which focused more on acoustic guitar and less on the boogie style of Humble Pie, were written by Frampton, except for the cover of the Stones' Jumping Jack Flash. 4 of the songs would become live staples and made it to Comes Alive. Frampton's Camel had a better showing, reaching number 110. However, its 4 singles also failed to chart. Most songs were again written by Frampton, although the live hit, Do You Feel Like We Do, was co-written by members of his band. Only the song and Lines on My Face make it to Comes Alive. Something's Happening only hit number 125, and it doesn't appear any singles charted. See the pattern? But 3 of the songs became live staples. The follow-up, Frampton, did reach number 32 in the US, mainly on the strength of songs that would be hits live the following year. Show Me the Way and Baby I Love Your Way. These 2 and 2 others made it into the live set for Comes Alive. Frampton Comes Alive, which includes mostly the Frampton-penned songs mentioned previously, also included the Humble Pie release Shine On, which he had also written. A 25th anniversary version contains 4 additional songs, about 17 minutes of additional music. This is an important distinction because the final song on the 1976 version was Do You Feel Like We Do, the 14-minute monster. And just preceding this was today's song, Lines on My Face, a 7-minute song and comprises the rest of side 4 of the LP. So, if you're going to be lazy, you're just going to play the whole side. The main reason Frampton left Humble Pie was the loud rockin' nature of the latter's music, which overshadowed the skill and craftsmanship that Peter had spent his career mastering. Do You Feel shows this mastery in a rock and roll context, especially during the middle guitar and talk box solo, but Lines on My Face does a better job in a languid, soulful manner. This is another breakup song similar to Toto's I Won't Hold You Back. Whereas that song had the protagonist being very adult, Frampton's being, as he called it, a little whiny. The lyrics themselves are pretty poetic, which in some ways means that they are not straightforward. The song has a straightforward A-B, A-B, A-B verse-chorus structure, but that's not to diminish it. It's perfect and grows perfectly with the music. On our live version, the song starts about 8 seconds from silence with just Frampton on that soulful guitar. Stanley Sheldon plays a little subtle bass but no rhythm, and drummer John Siomos is tapping his cymbals. But it's a full 45 seconds into the track before we get the steady beat. At that point, you can hear Bob Mayo playing the electric piano fills very subtly. And it's a full minute before we hear Frampton's first verse.
Lines on my head from that one thing she said. She spoke of strangers that don't sleep to bed. Kept on trying, buying time, not waiting on fate. I somehow got the feeling that I opened my eyes too late.
It sounds like the lines on my head are the furrowed brow when you just don't get it. Somebody says something and you go, what the fuck? I think the second lines is her position that they won't be doing the nasty until they are better acquainted and no longer strangers. But this didn't seem to unduly deter him, as he kept trying and hoping that fate wouldn't intervene and she'd go off with another. However, in retrospect, she might have already been gone. The chorus is a quick 6-line affair and doesn't rhyme.
I saw where you came from, call out your name, but there's no answer. We live on your doorstep, made you my wife, I don't need that, yeah.
Taking into account the last line of the first verse where he opened his eyes too late, The first three lines of the chorus seem to me that he espied her coming out of someone else's flat, and he called to her, perhaps to call her out, but she ignored him. The second three lines sound like any young couple in a big city, living on their front porch steps because they can't afford any entertainments. And in that description of domesticity, they were wedded. But he realizes that with everything else going on, what she's saying and what she's doing, he no longer needs that aggravation, hence a breakup. The second verse outlines his response. Laugh it off, be of good cheer, and trust in your support group.
Lines on my face while I live, lest I cry. Hey, Speed City, dead and gritty, yeah, waving me goodbye. Now there's so many people, my family or friends, trying so hard to make me smile till this heartache man.
The third verse takes a stab at her, perhaps describing how she's landing on her feet while he's still stuck in the dream turned nightmare. And he's still fighting it, unwilling to admit the truth, but with the realization that life still goes on.
Ice in her eyes, frozen tears could never be a surprise. Well, you can't erase a dream, you can only wake me up. Well, my mind is turning slower, never to accept defeat. Well, it don't matter, it don't matter. Still got a house, I got a heat. I saw where you came from. Oh, that's your
God, it's
name,
giving me
but
goosebumps.
there's no answer.
I really like the way the music swells at the end of each verse, leading into the relatively bombastic choruses. And then at the end of the chorus, it's like the calm after the storm, the blue skies after a hurricane. And yes, blue is a double entendre there. And we revert to that soulful guitar solo we get before each verse. And after the third chorus, we get a great, real rock and roll guitar solo before the chorus repeats again. It's like a great venting of all the frustration in his life gets erased with that impassioned piece. The original album cut repeats the chorus during the final fade out, but live, that doesn't really work. So they concocted a brief alternative ending. Also on the album cut, there are backing vocals. Frampton's Camel only credits keyboardist at the time Mick Gallagher and additional guitarist Frank Carrillo with vocals, but it could just be Peter himself doing them on this song. Either way, live, he is the only singer. This might have been an unconscious choice because of the material, or it could have been because he sings the choruses very differently, making a background accompaniment impossible. Regardless, it works wonderfully. And if you play the LP, it leads into the song you love the most, the 14-minute saga that is Do You Feel Like We Do, which ends the recording. Personally, I much prefer this ending rather than how the 25th anniversary is ordered. Lines on My Face is the third song out of 18 tracks, and I can't imagine this slow song that early in a show. On the opposite end, I can see that Do You Feel Like We Do might have been the last song in the set as performed, and the 4 songs after that are all encores. This is where Humble Pie's Shine On and the Stones' Jumping Jack Flash are now located. But don't mess with my childhood. This is one of the albums I took to Germany along with stalwarts like Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You... Dark Sign. Dark Sign. That just ruined it.
It's like saying Dark Side of the Moon, but strong.
Moog, Dark Side of the Moog. This is one of the albums I took to Germany, along with stalwarts like Dark Side and Wish You Were Here and Trilogy. One final note, I think the reason why Frampton Comes Alive was so massively popular comes down to two things. First, the raw material that was the studio recordings was already presented. God, what was I on? Drugs? Go back up and let's change the text. One final note. I think the reason why Frampton Comes Alive was so massively popular comes down to two things. First, the raw material that was the studio recordings had already presented Peter as a great songwriter. And second, he played the stuffing out of them live. This is why it's such an apt album title. Whereas the studio cuts are fairly tepid and boring, Peter has an amazing charisma live. I've seen him twice, and he's just the man to make it happen. Well, that's it for the live version of Lines on My Head by Peter Frampton from the double disc Billboard #1 album Frampton Comes Alive from 1976. Next time, we'll see why Nobody Does It Better to Carly Simon. Jesus. Change that to than. Oh my God. Didn't I proofread this? Next time, we'll see why nobody does it better to Carly Simon than The Spy Who Loved Me. We'll see you then. Bye-bye. In 1974's Something's Happening, in 1975's you heard that. You weren't supposed to hear that. Frampton's solo debut was 1972's Winds of Change. Followed. Why? Frampton's solo debut.
Oh my God.
Don't make me laugh. Frampton's